Have you ever stared into a mirror for a little too long? So long that the face, looking back at you, starts to feel unfamiliar? For most of us, it's just a weird trick of the mind. But for a man named Julian, it was the beginning of a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Julian was a collector of antiques, and one day he brought home an old, ornate mirror he found at a dusty estate sale. It was beautiful, with a heavy, carved wooden frame. He hung it in his hallway, right across from his bedroom door. At first, everything was normal, but then he started noticing things. Small things. Sometimes, when he walked past, he'd catch a movement in the reflection out of the corner of his eye. But when he turned to look, there was nothing there. He'd see his reflection blink just a split second after he did. He brushed it off as his imagination. Maybe he was just tired from work. But the oddities grew more frequent and more unsettling. One evening, he was heading to bed and glanced at the mirror. His reflection was standing there, as expected, but it didn't move. Julian took a step back, his heart pounding. The reflection just stood there, staring, a faint, unnerving smile playing on its lips. Julian blinked, rubbed his eyes, and when he looked again, the reflection was mimicking him perfectly once more. He tried to convince himself he was seeing things. But sleep didn't come easy that night. He kept feeling like he was being watched. The next morning, he found a long, deep scratch on the wooden floor right in front of the mirror. There was no explanation for it. His dog, who usually slept in the hallway, was whimpering and hiding under his bed, refusing to come out. The following days were a blur of paranoia and fear. The reflection became bolder. It would wave at him when his own hands were in his pockets, with mouth words he couldn't hear. Julian became a prisoner in his own home, terrified to walk down his own hallway. He covered the mirror with a thick blanket, but he could still feel a cold presence emanating from it. One night, he was jolted awake by a sound. A slow, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the hallway, plucking up every last ounce of courage. Julian crept out of his bedroom. The blanket he had thrown over the mirror was on the floor, and standing in front of the mirror wasn't his reflection. It was something else. It looked like him, but twisted. Its limbs were too long, its fingers thin and spidery. Its eyes were dark, empty pits, and its smile stretched impossibly wide, and it was tapping on the glass. From the inside, the creature raised one long finger and pressed it against the mirror's surface. The glass rippled like water. Julian didn't scream. He was too frozen with terror. He could only watch as the creature, slowly, deliberately, began to push its hand through the rippling surface of the mirror. The air grew ice cold as a pale, claw-like hand emerged into his world. The rest of its body followed, unfolding itself from the mirror like an insect emerging from a chrysalis. It straightened up to its full, grotesque height and turned its empty gaze towards Julian. It took a step, then another, its long limbs moving with an unnatural grace. Julian finally found his voice and let out a strangled cry, stumbling backward into his room and slamming the door shut. He could hear it on the other side, its long nails scratching at the wood. That was the last thing anyone ever heard from Julian. When police were called to the apartment a week later, they found it empty. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of Julian. The only things out of place were the deep scratches on the bedroom door and the old, ornate mirror in the hallway, its surface now cloudy and dark, as if something had stained it from within. Sometimes, they say, if you look into it at just the right angle, you can see a face. A face that looks a lot like Julian's, trapped and screaming just behind the glass. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and maybe think twice the next time you look in the mirror. Have you ever had that creepy feeling that you're not alone, even when you're in your own home? For one family in Connecticut, that feeling became their terrifying reality. This is the story of the Bridgeport poltergeist. A case so intense that even seasoned paranormal investigators were left speechless. It all started in 1974 in a small, unassuming house in Bridgeport. The Gooden family, Gerard and Laura, and their adopted daughter Marcia, began experiencing strange occurrences. At first, it was small things, objects moving on their own, strange knocking sounds, and furniture rearranging itself. They tried to ignore it, chalking it up to an old house, settling, or maybe their imaginations running wild. But things quickly escalated. The activity seemed to center around their 10-year-old daughter, Marcia. A crucifix flew off the wall, a television levitated and crashed to the floor, and a heavy refrigerator was seen sliding across the kitchen. The knocking became so loud and persistent that it sounded like someone was desperately trying to break in. The police were called multiple times, but they could never find a source for the disturbances. One officer even witnessed a chair lift off the floor and hover for a few seconds before dropping. Firefighters who responded to a phantom fire call saw a knife float out of a drawer and hover in midair. They were all baffled. Desperate for answers, the family reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigators. The Warrens, along with a team of researchers and a priest, arrived at the house and immediately felt the oppressive energy. They documented poltergeist activity unlike anything they had seen before. During their investigation, objects flew around the room. Marcia was reportedly slapped and choked by an invisible force, and strange guttural voices echoed through the house. Ed Warren believed that the entity was inhuman and had attached itself to young Marcia. The theory was that the energy of a prepubescent child can sometimes act as a beacon for these types of spirits. The family was subjected to a constant barrage of paranormal attacks. They couldn't sleep, they couldn't eat, they lived in a state of perpetual fear. The entity even seemed to follow them when they left the house, tormenting them wherever they went. It was a living nightmare. The Warrens, along with Father William Charbonneau, decided an exorcism was the only way to free the family. The rite of exorcism was performed on the house, a grueling process that lasted for hours. The entity fought back violently. The house shook, objects were thrown with incredible force, and a terrifying, inhuman roar filled the air. But as the prayers continued, the activity began to subside. Slowly, a sense of peace returned to the home for the first time in months. After the exorcism, the paranormal activity ceased almost completely. The Gooden family, though forever changed by their experience, could finally live in their home without fear. They eventually moved away, hoping to leave the terrifying memories behind. The Bridgeport poltergeist case remains one of the most well-documented and intense poltergeist hauntings in American history. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the things that go bump in the night are very, very real. What do you think? Could you live in a house with that kind of history? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange and spooky stories. Stay safe out there. In every old house, there's always that one room. The one you avoid after dark, the one where you feel a chill, even in summer. For my family, that room was the attic. We'd just moved into a century-old Victorian home, the kind with creaky floors and stories etched into its walls. At first, it was charming, but soon the charm started to wear off. Replaced by a creeping sense of unease that all seemed to originate from the floor above our heads. It started subtly, a soft thud in the middle of the night, which we dismissed as the house settling. Then, we'd hear what sounded like marbles rolling across the wooden floorboards above our bedroom. My younger brother Leo was the first to really get spooked. He claimed he saw a shadow moving behind the small, circular window of the attic from the backyard. We told him it was just a tree branch, but his fear was contagious. Things escalated when my mom went up to the attic to find some old Christmas decorations. The pull-down ladder was stiff and coated in a thick layer of dust, as if it hadn't been used in decades. She was up there for maybe 10 minutes when we heard a loud crash, followed by her scream. We rushed to the hallway and found her scrambling down the ladder, pale as a ghost. She said a stack of old trunks had just toppled over on their own, right next to her. She refused to go back up, and honestly, none of us blamed her. From then on, the activity became more direct. Doors in the house would slam shut on windless days. We'd hear faint whispers that seemed to come from the vents. Too quiet to make out the words, but clear enough to make the hair on your arms stand up. Leo's room, which was directly below one side of the attic, became the epicenter. His toys would be rearranged while he was at school. He started having terrible nightmares and would wake up screaming, pointing at the ceiling, yelling, "It's watching me." My parents, trying to be rational, called in plumbers, electricians, and even a structural engineer. They all found nothing wrong with the house. The sounds had no logical source. The cold spots couldn't be explained. We were living with something that defied explanation, and it felt like it was feeding on our fear. The atmosphere in our home grew heavy and oppressive. We stopped having friends over. We walked around on eggshells, constantly listening, constantly waiting for the next strange occurrence. The breaking point came one evening when we were all in the living room. The power suddenly went out, plunging us into darkness. And then we heard it. Not a thump, not a whisper, but a slow, deliberate scraping sound from the attic. Scrape, scrape. It sounded like someone was dragging long, sharp nails across the floor, moving from one end of the house to the other, right above our heads. My dad grabbed a flashlight, his face set with determination, and said, "I've had enough of this." He pulled down the attic stairs and started to climb, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. My mom and I stood at the bottom, holding our breath. He reached the top, shone the light around, and for a moment there was silence. Then he yelled. It wasn't a scream of terror, but a shout of anger and surprise. He came back down the ladder, dragging something with him. It wasn't a demon or a ghost. It was an enormous, ancient-looking raccoon. It hissed and snarled, clearly as scared as we were. It turned out this giant raccoon had been living in our attic for who knows how long. It was knocking things over, scratching the floorboards, and its movements were the source of the thuds and scrapes. The whispers were probably just the wind whistling through a hole it had made in the roof. The shadow Leo saw, the raccoon climbing near the window. We had let our imaginations run wild, turning a simple pest problem into a paranormal nightmare. We had a professional safely remove our furry, uninvited guest and repair the roof. The house instantly felt lighter, quieter. The demon in our attic turned out to be just a big, grumpy raccoon looking for a home. It goes to show you, sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create in our own minds. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Ever heard of a house so terrifying, even the police were afraid to enter? Today, we're diving into the chilling story of the Ammons haunting in Gary, Indiana. A case so bizarre, it's often called the portal to hell. It all started in 2011 when LaToya Ammons and her 3 children moved into a small rental house on Carolina Street. Almost immediately, strange things began to happen. Swarms of black flies would appear out of nowhere, even in the dead of winter. Heavy footsteps echoed from the basement when no one was down there. Doors creaked open on their own, and wet footprints would mysteriously appear on the living room floor. At first, LaToya tried to rationalize it. But the activity escalated. becoming more personal and more terrifying. Her children started acting strangely. Her 9-year-old son's eyes would bulge, and his voice would deepen as he threatened his siblings. Her 7-year-old son would sit in a closet, talking to an unseen boy who described what it felt like to be killed. The most disturbing event was when LaToya's 12-year-old daughter was seen levitating several feet above her bed. Unconscious. Desperate for help, LaToya reached out to doctors, churches, and eventually the police. And this is where the story takes a truly unprecedented turn. Initially skeptical, seasoned police officers and Child Protective Services caseworkers became believers after witnessing the paranormal events for themselves. Captain Charles Austin of the Gary Police Department, a 36-year veteran, was one of the first responders. He reported seeing strange things, like the blinds in the house swinging when there was no breeze, and hearing unexplained growls. He even took a photo in the basement that seemed to show a ghostly figure. The official police report documented these events, including an incident where LaToya's 9-year-old son walked backward up a wall and ceiling, right in front of a CPS case manager and a family nurse. He landed on his feet without a scratch. The audio recording from inside the house captured a faint, ghostly voice whispering, "Hey," when a police officer asked a question. This recording, along with the official reports, made this case different from any other haunting. The evidence wasn't just personal testimony. It was documented by multiple, credible professionals. The family doctor, Jeffrey Onukwu, also witnessed the boys speaking in demonic voices and displaying unnatural strength. He wrote in his official report that he believed the family was suffering from a demonic possession. Fearing for her children's safety, LaToya sought an exorcism. A Catholic priest, Father Michael Magina, was called in. He performed multiple exorcisms on the house and on LaToya herself. He described the house as feeling like a portal to hell, claiming to have felt a powerful, malevolent presence. During the rituals, LaToya would convulse, and objects in the room would reportedly shake. After months of terror, the Amons family finally moved out of the house in 2012. The paranormal activity ceased as soon as they left. The house on Carolina Street sat vacant for years, a dark monument to the events that transpired within its walls. In 2016, Zach Bagans, the host of the show Ghost Adventures, bought the house and later had it demolished, claiming it was too dangerous to remain standing. The Amons haunting remains one of the most well-documented and perplexing paranormal cases in modern history. With signed affidavits from police, doctors, and social workers, it challenges our understanding of what's possible. Was it a shared delusion, a cry for help, or did the Amons family truly open a doorway to another dimension? The story of the Unholy House of Indiana leaves us with more questions than answers. A chilling reminder that some things might just be beyond our explanation. What do you think happened in that house? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries. Stay safe out there. Have you ever stared at a wood grain pattern or a textured ceiling and suddenly a face stares back at you? For most of us, it's a fleeting moment, a fun trick of the mind. But what if those faces never went away? What if they followed you, watched you, and became a constant part of your reality? This is the true story of a young girl who saw faces everywhere. Not just in patterns, but in the very fabric of her world. Her name was Jane. From a very young age, she noticed it. The knots in the wooden door of her bedroom would shift and warp, forming eyes that blinked slowly. The cracks in the pavement on her walk to school would arrange themselves into a long, sorrowful face. At first, she thought it was a game, something everyone experienced. She'd point them out to her parents. Look, there's a grumpy old man in the wallpaper. They would smile, pat her head, and say she had a great imagination. But for Jane, it wasn't imagination. It was as real as the nose on her own face. As she grew older, the faces became more detailed, more persistent, and more emotional. The water stain on the ceiling of the school library wasn't just a blob. It was a woman with tears streaming down her cheeks. The bark of an old oak tree in the park held the stoic, weathered face of a soldier. They were her silent companions, a secret audience to her life. She started to feel like she was never truly alone. During class, a face in the stucco wall would seem to be listening intently to the teacher. At night, a face in the shadows of her curtains would watch her as she slept. This constant surveillance began to take a toll. She became withdrawn and anxious. How could she explain to her friends that the reason she didn't want to go to the movies was because the modeled pattern on the cinema carpet would morph into a crowd of screaming faces? How could she tell her family that she was terrified of the bathroom because the marble tiles formed a jury of judgmental expressions? The world, which for others was made of objects and textures, was for her a gallery of countless, silent onlookers. Her imagination was now a source of deep-seated fear. One day, while researching for a school project, she stumbled upon a term, pareidolia. It's the psychological phenomenon where the mind responds to a stimulus, usually an image or a sound, by perceiving a familiar pattern where none exists. Seeing faces in clouds, animals in rock formations, or even hearing hidden messages in music played backward, it all fell under this umbrella. Reading this was like a switch flipping in her mind. She wasn't going crazy. There was a name for it. It was a known, documented human tendency. This discovery was the first step toward reclaiming her life, realizing that it was her brain's pattern recognition software working overtime. She started to see the faces, not as external entities, but as a product of her own mind. She learned to control it. When a menacing face appeared in the frost on a window, she would consciously unsee it, focusing on the individual ice crystals until the face dissolved back into a random pattern. She began to treat it like a superpower she could turn on and off, rather than a curse. Today, Jane is a successful graphic designer. Her unique ability to see patterns and shapes in the mundane has become her greatest asset. She can find inspiration in a coffee spill or a crumpled piece of paper. The faces are still there, but they no longer haunt her. They are simply a part of her unique perception of the world. A reminder of the incredible and sometimes strange ways our brains work. Her story teaches us that sometimes the things that make us feel most isolated are the very things that, when understood, can become our greatest strengths. Thank you so much for watching. If you've ever experienced something similar, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about the amazing human mind. See you next time.